Hello! Welcome back to another Plan With Me video. This is the second of my two-part video bullet journal setup series for November 2020. The first video shows how I created my data-inspired cover page. I've linked that video in the description below and in the cards if you'd like to check it out. My monthly setups always include a set of core spreads, the first being what I call my daily log. For my fellow Trekkies out there, I hope you get a laugh out of my little star date joke. This spread is where I write down anything about my day I think is worth remembering in a basic bulleted list form. I've been keeping a log like this in almost exactly this format since 2009. In the moments I'm feeling particularly nostalgic or looking for a trip down memory lane, I'll grab all my past notebooks, set them out side by side, and read exactly what I was doing on the same date, year after year. Is that weird? Okay, yeah, it might be a little weird, but I also find it super rewarding. I've decorated this daily log with the iconic Star Trek communicator symbol with a silhouette of the Starship Enterprise D outlined in silver to add a little interest. Using watercolor in my bullet journal always makes the setup process take a little longer, but it's worth waiting because I love the color and texture once everything dries. Outlining the watercolored areas using a micron pen in size 01 really makes the lettering pop. Next, I added the monthly calendar. Although my weekly schedule spreads start on Mondays, all of my drawn-out calendars like this one start with Sunday. I like to have this small monthly overview on the daily log to help me keep track of the days and for quick, easy reference. I went over the lettering to fill in any areas I thought needed a little touching up, and lastly, I divided the 2 pages into 4 equal parts. Next, I moved on to my daily tracking spread, which for the sake of continuing with the Star Trek fun, I called the Captain's Log. My habit, sleep, and step tracking has taken many forms over the last several years, but for now, I'm keeping it pretty simple. I started by filling in the designated areas for each of my trackers. The habit tracker is on top, and I combined my sleep and step tracking into one box on the bottom. The color was achieved by mixing a golden yellow and a dark sage green color together. My hope is that it resembles the mustard color on the uniforms worn by Starfleet officers like Data. I flipped back to the previous page to make sure there wasn't any intense bleed through that would prevent me from continuing to work on the spread. I definitely expect there to be some because my Leuchtturm 1917 notebook paper is not designed for watercoloring or heavy pens. I never much minded the ghosting before though, until I started using paints in my setups. I was a little upset by the bleed through of the Enterprise from the previous page, but I wasn't completely surprised. I realized after the fact that of course this would happen because I used a water-soluble Tombow dual-brush pen to fill in the starship. I tried to avoid this moving forward. By now, I've painted and outlined my little Vulcan dude who may or may not be Spock. You decide. He's surrounded by the recognizable gesture for the famous Star Trek phrase, "Live long and prosper." After coloring in the title lettering, the watercolor tracker boxes were finally dry enough to write on. I started by adding numbers and letters to represent the days of the week across the top box and only numbers to the bottom. Each box was carefully outlined before I added the habits I am currently most interested in keeping track of. I used to track upwards of 20 to 25 habits every single day, but recently I've decided to place more focus on fewer, more important items. It's still a struggle for me to leave dishes in the sink at the end of the night, but priorities, am I right? My current habits include wake by 7 a.m., make my bed, exercise, meditate, read, and be creative. In the hopes of salvaging the mess that was the Enterprise bleed through, I outlined that sucker in silver. That looks intentional, right? Well, sometimes you just gotta go with it. After flipping the page, I started working on my mood tracker. I go back and forth with this every month. To track moods or to not track moods? That is the question. Ultimately, I decided that November is likely to be another stressful month, so I kept the mood tracker in. Last month, I found some interesting patterns so the data could prove useful. I used a stencil to quickly create a cluster of 30 stars, one for each day of the month. I don't know about you, but freehanding stars is super difficult. What is it about them? Not sure, but glad I had stencils to fall back on. In my opinion, there is no shame in using them, especially when they make your setup process that much easier. The top portion of the page turned into the key. I flipped back to the mood categories I tracked last month and rewrote them on the strings of dangling stars. The moods I included are cheerful, calm, anxious, bored, sad, upset, and curious. Next, I filled in each star category with a different pattern. As the days go by, I'll fill in each star below. Some watercolor accents were added to spruce things up, but I wasn't entirely happy with how this page turned out. It felt busy and cramped. Oh well, we must move on. So instead of getting hung up on the moods page, I turned my attention to the fun quote page I designed to celebrate Data's love of Detective Sherlock Holmes. There are several episodes throughout the Next Generation series where Data and Geordi and other members of the Enterprise get wrapped up in Holmes stories on the ship's holodeck, section of the ship that creates lifelike computer simulations for recreational purposes. Data loves acting out classic Holmes mysteries. I began by filling in circles that I hoped would represent a sun-like star and a planet resembling Saturn. This was homage to the opening credits of the Next Generation series. Once those dried, I lettered Elementary Dear Data, which is actually the name of the third episode of the second season of Next Generation. It was the 29th overall episode and originally aired on December 5th, 1988. It was even nominated for 2 Emmy Awards the following year in 1989. In this episode, the computer simulation is tasked with creating a Holmes-style mystery that would be difficult for Data's sophisticated android brain to solve. Long story short, the computer creates a sentient computer being that takes control of the ship's stabilizer mechanisms. I won't spoil the ending here. You'll have to go watch it for yourself to find out what happens. What I love most about this episode is that it contains elements from and references to several Sherlock Holmes short stories, including A Scandal in Bohemia, The Red-Headed League, The Adventure of the Speckled Band, and The Adventure of the Bruce Partington Plans. Who doesn't love a good crossover? Scroll the show note links in the description below to learn more. Finally, I started working on the piece that pulled this page all together, the Sherlock Holmes pipe. Data walks around with one when he is dressed up in his Holmes holodeck attire. Just like the rest of my setup, I already had it sketched out. I like doing this ahead of time because I can focus on functional design first and the artistic elements separately. I really need to concentrate on the latter because, well, I am prone to making mistakes. I don't own the best paints, and I'm still learning about the best techniques for layering watercolor, but here I chose to keep the layering light so that hints of gold still peeked through. I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out in the end. Once it was all dry, I came back in with my Pentel Silver gel pen and the Micron to outline the sun and the pipe to add some last-minute definition. Lastly, I added several Star Trek-themed doodles at the bottom of the following 4 spreads to keep the theme alive throughout the month. If you enjoyed this Plan With Me video, let me know with a comment below or by hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!